Hello, 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 and welcome to Unique Leaders Live. I'm Megan DiMartino, and it's Friday. Wow, what a week. And these weeks are going by so quickly. This is the end of March already, March 19th. I am so blessed to be here today with you and to share my guest story, Miss Charlynda Scales. And before I go into Charlynda and anything about her story, I just want to share a little bit about Unique Leaders Live. Unique Leaders Live is really all about my guest. It is all about their story because their secrets are in their story. One doesn't just start out and be the accomplished business leader that she is currently. It is about the journey. And this journey truly gives insight to not only she, but also you, because you will see in her evolution and journey, you'll see yourself in so many dynamics. And that's really what Unique Leaders Live is about. I've asked all the time, how did you start a skincare line? How did you know to start a skincare line? How did you start a spa? All of those questions and everything in between. And in the lockdown, or that very challenging time that started about a year ago, right now, goodness gracious, I knew in my spirit that I was not to go dark. And during that time, I was at the spa every day, working on projects, but certainly other different lives. And one day I interviewed a friend of mine who was just beginning an directory for alternative medical practitioners. And I asked her if she wanted to come on. We were also playing around with StreamYard. And so she came on, and it was Easter time. And the response to it was extraordinary. People were so intrigued by not only her story, but the candor of it and the just the realness of it. And so I decided to continue on, and I invited other people to join me, and the same reaction happened. And so with that, Unique Leaders Live was born. And so today we have Miss Charlynda Scales. And Charlynda is not only a beautiful person physically, but a beautiful person in her spirit. I was blessed to listen to she on the Glenn Lundy Rise and Grind show several months back. And I just made a note, and I said I would love to approach Charlynda to share her story with you. I'm not going to go on about her story because it is so full and rich. I want she to share that story with you. So without further ado, I would like you to visit with me and the story of Charlynda Scales. Hello, hello.
Hi, how are you?
I am well, and I'm so blessed to have you today with me, and for you, Charlynda, to share your amazing story. Just so blessed and so rich with dynamics. I mean, I could go on because I shared with you when we first emailed you and contacted you that I come from a family business. And, but I don't want to ruin the story. So I don't want to go on to that. But there was so much about what you shared with Glenn that it just really resonated with me about your journey and your spirit and your heart. And I want you to just share with our guests that today. So let's go back to young Charlynda, and the first, in a sense, I should say, recollection of yourself and your, I don't want to say just drive, but your creativity. Where did that start from, and a little bit about your background?
Certainly, Megan. Well, thank you for having me. First and foremost, this is an honor. And my family's last name is Farrell. So even through my life, no one really knew that I belonged to this Farrell family from Tennessee. They were a military family, and my family unit growing up in Tennessee was my grandparents and my mom and my aunt and her two boys. So that was my family unit in Cookeville. This is a small town like Andy Griffith, a little bitty town with the stoplight. And I really loved growing up with my grandparents. I think that dynamic led to the creativity, the wholesomeness, certainly.
Mhm.
of thinking outside the box. My granddad, I would take walks with him, and he would tell me about the Korean Vietnam War. And as a young child, like it seems like a tall tale. It seemed like every time I walked with him, he was filling my head with all of these stories. I said, that could not have been real. Route 66? What is that? And it was vivid, it was this second greatest thing to reading a book.
It's true.
And that's where I think it comes from, being
Mhm.
able to be enriched by stories like that of their upbringing. I have a lot of musicians in my family, and I have military veterans, nurses, hairdressers. So they're all kind of like, they all have their own talents. But
Mhm.
that's what I did notice about my family, is they encourage you to find your gift and
Mhm.
walk in it. And they're watching closely.
Absolutely, and protecting, as your grandfather did. And, my grandparents were, immigrants from Italy, Ireland, and Germany, and I knew several of them well, and but the stories, but one, my grandmother from Italy was very important in my life, very, very important person, and I agree. And my children have had relationships with their grandparents, and it's a very, very important piece. And I know that kids that don't have that really miss on some level a piece of history and piece of history of themselves. So it's a blessing to have that. And so as so here in Cooksville, Tennessee, with your family, and most of the folks that you just mentioned lived in the general area with you, meaning the
In the same house.
meaning the stylist as well. So, gosh, you had your hair done and so forth by everybody.
Mhm.
And you shared about your grandfather having been not here in the military, but also he was a storyteller and a very uh, fun person to be around. But he was also a creative person. So, share a little bit about because that's a very pivotal part to the period of time you're in right now, but just give us a little piece of your grandfather. What was his name, by the way?
His name is Charlie Farrell, and it's Charlie Farrell Jr. And his call sign when he was in the military was Mutt. He had the ability to blend in anywhere, and he was just a very adaptable personality. It seemed like even for that era, his friends came from all different backgrounds. You didn't really, to talk to him was to think like he was living in a different world than the
Yeah.
rest of everyone else. But that also was a result of being in the military with a different atmosphere, where you don't have those barriers like what you look like or where you're from. You have a mission that you have to get done. So I think that the military transcended a lot of the domestic things that we were dealing with back home during that time.
Mhm.
But yeah.
What year was this when you were walking with him and he was sharing, or wherever, but he was sharing his stories?
It was the early 80s.
Early 80s.
Early
Okay. I was kind of with the Korean War and the Vietnam War, I was thinking that it was probably early 80s. Yes.
80s.
Yeah.
And he was a very big on problem solving. So you hear him think things through, or he would look at something like, how can I improve, whether it was something around the house, whatever it was. But the common thread in our family was he was obsessed about this sauce. He thought condiments were wasteful. And you have a lot of them in your fridge, and probably half of them are expired. And he wanted to do something more efficient. So if he could just take everything in the kitchen in the cabinet and combine it into one, and you use it for everything. So that was something that was very creative about him, was one sauce for all in a mason jar, and we would just eat it. Breakfast, no
I
matter.
think it's brilliant. I mean, when you said that, I said to myself, well, I'm going to walk into my refrigerator right now and see that Charlie was correct, meaning that half of this stuff should be thrown away. When you said about the expiration, oh, I have the whatever. And of course, it's expired. So, but also when you said about the Bloody Mary, and meaning that, it's good for all, it reminded me when you were speaking. I don't know if you ever saw the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and
Ah,
with the Windex,
yeah.
how it you had a pimple, the Windex. I mean, whatever it was, it worked for everything. Not that you would put the Mutts Sauce on something, a
You
topical.
never know.
Never know.
We'll talk about it, but I've got some stories. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure where it has been utilized.
Mhm.
So Grandpa Charlie was a big part of your life, and you then, went to college. I mean, so did you go to high school in Cooksville? Is that where you did your
So I
formative years?
grew up my whole life in Cookville up till 18. My mom, she was a single mother, and she was one of the biggest influences in my life besides my grandfather. But she's a very driven personality. She was someone who said, "I don't want anything handed to me." I think a lot of that came from my grandparents' influence. I'm the same way. Like, we want to work for it, and she wanted to get her college degree, and she wanted to branch out on her own, not being dependent upon her parents. So when she
Mhm.
moved out, I didn't realize we had moved into like Section 8 low income housing projects, as they call it, plainly.
Mhm.
It wasn't until I got to elementary school and the kids were like, "Hey, you live in the projects." I was like, I mean, I didn't know that. I live
Mhm.
in a nice apartment that's always clean and there's food on the table.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, it's just a matter of perspective. My mother never let me feel deprived, and I enjoyed my time with her. And she was heavy on education. She enrolled me in so many programs that my cousins would tease me, like, "What program are you in this summer?" Because we know we're not hanging out with you because she probably enrolled you in a program. And that ended up helping me as I got to high school, because I tore my ACL. I wanted to play sports. I still loved sport. I was big into running and soccer. And I thought that my future was to get a sports scholarship to go play soccer or run track. I was a 200-meter runner. I tore my ACL the first game senior year, and all the scouts disappeared. And I was sitting there like, this is the most depressing
Mhm.
part of my life. I reached a low that I didn't think that I could be at emotionally. And she picked me up. She's like, you need to stop looking at your self-worth in terms of like one dimension,
That's
like
right.
one thing, one path, because it's faith-based. Like, the God that made you for great things.
Mhm. Mhm. And that detour
And
it was merely that. It was a detour. It
right.
was taking you from what you perceived, and the word you used earlier was perspective, about when you're talking about the projects. Because I grew up, outside of New York City, and of course, I'm very familiar with those terminologies and labels, and those are ridiculous. But yes, I couldn't agree more. But it's about your perspective of your own personal reality.
And
Yes.
that was my first instance with a rock bottom moment.
Hmm.
How am I going to pick myself up from this? She said, you had good grades. She said so. And I was sitting in the back of a math class, and this kid was filling out it's called Reserve Officer Training Corps, ROTC, for the Air Force. And it was a scholarship application that the Air Force was offering. And he said, but you had to do stuff in high school, like extracurriculars and
Wow.
community service and all this stuff. Flashback to being teased about all these programs.
Right.
Programs were all the things that I sat there, I took it from him, filled it completely out, turned it into my guidance counselor. My guidance counselor turned it in, like, she mailed it in. And that led to me getting a full ride scholarship to the college of my choice.
Wow.
But it was mom's foresight, right? That you're not a
Absolutely.
one-dimensional person, and I'm going to enroll you in programs so you're well-rounded.
Mhm.
And I give my, hats off to her, because she saw something that I honestly didn't see in myself.
And so many kids today, I think it was more prevalent back in those days, although a lot of kids play sports, but it's that well-rounded that you just said, that dynamic of not just the sports like you were injured from, but the other activities that
Mhm.
showed this very diversified individual. Yes, it's very key. I know when I was in high school, that type of thing was my mom. I was a candy striper, and I did all
In
sorts
the
of other
hospital?
things that she felt was important, just like your mom. Yeah.
Love it.
So, mhm.
You
Yeah,
were I did that too. What part of the hospital did you work in? Did you have a
I worked well, when I did it for a couple years, junior and senior year, and many, but a lot of elder care, a
Mhm.
lot of that. But kids, pediatrics and children predominantly.
I love that.
Yes, I have great memories of that, and great memories of different things like you're talking about. And like your friend said, it filled the summers too. And I guess our mothers were cut from the same cloth to not. My mother would always say, "Don't waste your minutes," you
Oh,
know.
yeah.
So those idle moments, she didn't like those, so we had to be involved. So yeah, very very hats off to our moms with
Uh-huh.
St. Patty's Day.
Mhm.
So therefore then you got that full ride scholarship, and, where did you go?
I went to Clemson. I originally wanted to go to Clemson University in South Carolina because their women's soccer team was the best, I thought. So
Mhm,
still, I was thinking sports, but they had an ROTC program. So I said, well, I'll go there. And while you're in school, you have weekly seminars that you have to go, like training to prepare you that when you get out of college, for the 4 years of college that they paid for, or 5 if you were an engineer, you owe them equal amount of time in the military.
mhm,
But the catch is you're coming in as a commissioned officer. So you're going to be paid a good rate, and you're also going to be leading people from day one. You're going to have a team. You're going to be responsible for people the moment you put your uniform on. And that was, I didn't really understand the difference. If there was a difference between enlisted and officer, to me, they're still not. I think that they both have equal amount of responsibility and
mhm.
um, job importance. But my grandfather, coming from a time, it's a different military. So when I
Yes.
said, yeah, I'm going into the military, I'm going to be an officer. And he just cried. He's like, we've never had an officer in our family. And that, you're thinking, oh, wow, this is doing something for you. And that was that thought of your accomplishments don't just belong to you.
Mhm,
They're your ancestors' accomplishments. They're your grandmother's accomplishments. They're your mom's accomplishments. And I just approached college with a new sense of determination. Like I have
mhm.
got to get this done. He needs to see this moment. I want him to be able to see me as an officer because at that point we learned that he had lung cancer. So it was
Mhm,
just like a race against the clock.
mhm.
Is he going to be able to see it? So
And did he? Was
he,
he well, some of it, I'm sure.
he did. Actually, he was the first person to salute me. So there's a ceremony that they do for commissioning ceremonies. It's called the Silver Dollar Salute, and someone from your family or someone close to you renders you a salute. At Clemson, there's these stairs that have molds of soldiers, and you walk through them, symbolizing your emergence from being just a student citizen to being a soldier. And
Mhm.
take a left face, and then the person who salutes you is standing there. And
Oh,
then
wow.
you do your
Oh,
salute, and then you can give them a hug. And then you hand them a silver dollar as a token
wow.
of that time. And he was too sick to be at my college graduation, which was the day before.
Mhm.
But when I did the ceremony, I was like, that is the sharpest salute I've ever seen of any human. To this day, I've never seen a salute better than the one that he gave. I almost forgot to salute.
I bet I would have. I've been so, entranced by his, oh, wow.
Yeah,
What
I
a
was like,
wonderful
that is
thing.
someone who has been through 2 wars, who has
Yes.
seen so many things, all the stories, or the
Mhm.
culmination of him standing there, not really needing his cane because he was standing so straight and just snapping that salute. I was just, I was like, God, thank you. If I only have this moment in time, let my brain never forget it. I
Exactly.
I just
Exactly.
need this moment. He gave me that moment, and he did pass away less than a year later. So
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
was like, I have that. No matter what happens after this,
It's in your heart forever. And as you were sharing this, I'm visualizing, like you said, the Andy Griffith, the one stoplight, and I'm visualizing your town, and you walking with him, and he sharing these stories, and then go evolving to this moment. What a visual! But it's your life, and just what, like you said, something that you'll hold dear forever. Wonderful, wonderful. As I shared, I didn't share this piece, but we have a lot of military background as well. And
Thank you.
yeah, my father was in the Air Force during the Second World War, and my first husband's father was actually in the Second World War. He was a bombardier, and he was shot down and was a POW for about 2 years. So, just a lot of stories and a lot of richness to our heritage.
Thank you for your family service.
Yeah, they were special guys for sure. And my own husband, Paul Tyler, had been in the Korean War, and so with my father-in-law, from my first husband to this gentleman, they became great pals. And as my daughter has always said, give a guy a war, a gun, a boat, a plane, and they're friends forever.
Right?
So, right?
A little bit.
Mm-hmm. They were buddies. So regardless of, again, family, whatever's, they were buddies. They were just great friends. Yes. So you went then from there, then you went into the service.
Yes. So my first assignment was Robins Air Force Base in Georgia. And they told me that my job was going to be an acquisitions program manager. And it's like, acquisitions, 63 Alpha. All right. Get down there to Georgia, and which was great news to my mother, because she was thinking, oh my gosh, they're going to ship her off the war. Like her thought was, as soon as you get your assignment, it's probably going to be overseas or something. And when I said Georgia, she's like, oh, that's like a 4-hour drive. She was so happy that she could just come visit me. And I wasn't prepared for where I worked, because I was still thinking I'm going to be working with aircraft. My grandfather was an aircraft mechanic, so all the stories he told were about being on the flight line. That I thought that's the Air Force. You're on the flight line. You're near the plane. And they gave me the directions, and I pulled into this office building, and I walk in, and it's just like corporate office building. I'm like, I can't be in the right place.
Right. What am I doing here?
Yeah, I can't be in the right place. I'm in my uniform, but everyone walking around is a civilian. I mean, they're dressed in plain clothes. And I asked them, I said, this is my name. And they said, oh, here's your supervisor. And this woman saunters over. She said, oh, okay. Hi, Lieutenant. Your cubicle is between Larry and Barry.
Larry and Barry. Okay.
And that was it. She's like, I got to meet you. And she just walks off. And I'm sitting there like, my cubicle is between Larry and Barry are the words I never thought. I did not have that on my bingo card.
So, right. Larry, Barry. Yes. And there's Charlynda.
I went around just looking in cubicles, looking at name tags. And sure enough, there was Larry and a blank cubicle and Barry. And they came, the two country boys, and hey, welcome, LT. Nice to see you. Welcome.
Now, were they in this? Were they civilians, or were they in the military?
They were civilians.
Oh, wow.
2 civilian. One was a logistician, and the other guy was an engineer. And just 2 laid back country guys are like, we've been working here for over 20 years. We've seen so many of you young whippersnappers. And I was like, this is surreal. This is interesting. And I said, so I work here at this desk. I don't work on the flight line. They're like, the flight line. Ha, ha, ha. So I realized at that point that my job is more aligned with corporate America, program management, project management. That is what my job was. And a lot of your team members are going to be civilians. A lot of the people that you work with are defense contractors like Northrop Grumman, Boeing, Lockheed Martin.
So you're saying that all 4 years of your military was in this genre that you're speaking about?
Yes, but I ended up doing over a decade.
So you did, because you said initially that you had to repay, so to speak, the
Yeah.
years, but you did over a decade. Okay. But so you were never on the flight line?
No, there was
No.
there's never, well, I would go, so here's the thing, a lot of your team members, some of them are engineers, flight test folks, they have to be on the flight line, maintainers.
Right.
So I would, in order to understand my job better, if you're putting something on contract or you're doing a negotiation, you want to understand the capability or
Yeah.
the weapon or whatever it is that you're
Mhm.
putting on a contract. So for me,
Mhm.
you would take that extra step to go out there,
Yeah.
climb
Yeah.
around in the plane, learn
Yeah.
about it. So when you're at the negotiation table and someone's saying that this nut and bolt cost $50 million, you're like, no, it doesn't.
Mhm.
No.
Yes. Wow. So I'm now putting this together. That this is truly well, bottom line is somebody has to do this. Like you said, we look at movies and this, that, and the other thing, and it's the romanticizing of things. I suppose, but the nuts and bolts, as you said, have to be done, and the monetizing of it and the foundational pieces of all of this have to be done by somebody.
Right.
Barry, and you. You
There's a
know,
business side to the military.
yes, exactly. Yes, it's a very important piece. So, so over a decade. Now, when did you go to graduate school? After you finished the military?
So that was the great thing I discovered about being active duty. There's so many facets to the opportunities that you have while you're still in uniform, while you're still serving your country. Some of the things that I did while I was still active duty, um, they have sports. I ended up playing sports for the Air Force. I was
Oh,
on their
wow.
track team. I traveled once a year. I would travel to Europe, all over Europe, and run for the Air Force.
Oh, wow.
I have went to language school. They've paid for you to learn languages. They've paid for graduate school while I was still on. I never left my uniform. Went to graduate school.
Wow.
They
What a
pay for all of these things because they are investing in you. The longer that you stay in, you are an asset of the United States military. And the more that more skills they can add to your plate, the better for them.
wow. This is a piece that certainly I did not. I mean, I guess peripherally would make sense, but what the advantages are, I can see why people stay in the military for such a long time, because it becomes not only your life, but the assets to it are amazing.
Right. There's real no need to leave. And I think somewhere, maybe it was 5 or 6 years in, I did a lot of traveling in my background, and they call it going TDY. Well, you're familiar with some of these terms. Going TDY is temporary duty. So you're going on a
Mhm.
business trip, basically.
Mhm.
Well, you weren't allowed to keep your Sky Miles. They weren't yours to keep. But somewhere around like year 5 or 6, they announced that you can own your own Sky Miles. So if we send you on a business trip to halfway across the world, those are your Sky Miles. I was like, but y'all paid for the trip and I get the Sky Miles too. So if you have time off that you've accumulated, you
Mhm.
can use your Sky Miles for
Wow.
free. I was like, they're paying for your vacations too. I mean,
Wow. That's
it,
a perk. That's a perk
right.
from the government. Yeah, that's great.
And
Yes.
now, even with the pandemic, they announced that you can keep all the days. So if you had to work from home, a lot of our soldiers and they're working from home, like we would telework.
Mhm.
And they said if you haven't had to take days off, you've accumulated all these days off, you get to keep those vacation days. And I was like, some people probably have like 30, 40, 50 vacation days.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I
Wow.
mean, there's a lot of great things that people don't really discuss because, you look at it, it is service and sacrifice, but there is a reason. There are great reasons why people have said, I want to get out of my small town, or you know what, I need a better life, or I have, how am I going to take care of my family? Medical bills are expensive. Those are the things that people do join the military just for that.
For sure, for sure. And you do, like you said, you do hear that, but it just resonates when you bring it to life. as you're sharing it here, because it's but it's such um, I don't know what the word is, but all encompassing, but also giving, but receiving. There's that give and take, like you're saying, and
You do
it's
have
a
to
wonderful life.
understand. You do
Mm,
have to understand that at some point, and I think that this is just the overarching. At some point, it's going to hit home. Like the sacrifice that you make in your life, in physically, mentally, psychologically, it is there.
mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm,
there's also got to be something in it that has positivity.
mm-hmm.
And there are some positive points. There's also, I mean, the military, it's still the military. And I think when I was in college is when we had 9/11. And being in college and having your commander pull you in, all the students saying, this is what you signed up for. There's no, you know, you can
Yes,
go to war. War
yes,
doesn't exist. It's not all college parties and fun.
right.
You put that uniform on and you can get shipped out. If they run out of people that they're going to call up, you're a cadet.
Yeah.
You're on contract. We can call you up if it
Mhm.
gets to that.
It's a
And
sobering reality. Yes.
mhm,
At that time, very sobering.
yeah.
And yes, now I have several questions about you being a female, and also releasing or leaving the military. But during these years when you were doing your um, uh, business, critical mass job, were you living in a barracks? How did you live? Where were you?
I lived in an apartment.
An
Uh,
apartment.
yeah. So when I went in, they give you a salary and they give you a housing stipend and they give you what's called basic allowance for subsistence. So it's like an extra living stipend, and that was able to take care of me. I don't. I never lived on base. I don't think I had the option to live on base at that point,
Mhm.
being single. But I lived in apartments for most of my life, and then
Mhm.
got my own house, kind of thing. So
And
I
I
mean,
guess
by
you
all
were also,
intents and purpose, I look like someone who started working in corporate America and had her own place and stuff.
because you were an officer from the get-go, so you were treated, like you said, very differently as well. And so that when I said barracks, and then I said, well, she was an officer, why would she would not have been in a barrack? But is that type of thing even still in existence, or do most people live stateside? Do they live in a home or an apartment?
Oh
I'm
yeah,
just
we definitely still have barracks, and I think a lot of our enlisted troops. You got to look at the average age of a military troop is 18 to
Mhm,
25. So you're coming out of high school, and the barracks aren't like some status symbol. It's also like we need to watch after you. You're still young. You
interesting.
still are someone we need to look after, and it's
Mhm,
it's an easier transition. It's almost like when I came out of high school and I went to a dorm in college. It's
right.
like dorm life. That's the same age bracket.
Mhm.
So when I came out of college, I was in my 20s, but they're coming into the military at 18, 19.
Mhm.
So
Interesting. Yeah, very much so. I never ever have thought about it that way, but that's truth. It's just helping them with that transition of life. Interesting. And so, what made you decide to leave then, with all of these perks and building your career and education with it? What made you ultimately decide to leave?
well, I kind of took my boots off, but not really. I joined the reserves in 2015. Air Force Reserves is a different opportunity to be able to serve your country. You sign up to do, you can do 4 weeks. You can do as much time as you want to, but a minimum of like, I think, 4 to 6 weeks a year.
Hmm.
Depending on how your contract is structured, you could do drill weekends. Some people have to do weekend drill. My contract is I go on an active duty base. I basically work alongside the active duty troops. I don't do weekend drill.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
it looks almost the same as when I was serving on active duty. But
Hmm.
2015, I was eating something. I was stationed here at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, and I was eating a meal, and I was like, this tastes awful. I don't know what's wrong with this. What is missing? And I told my mom, I said, you know what? I haven't had my granddad's the sauce he made since he passed away. I don't think anybody knows how to make it. Can somebody whip this up for me?
And
Yeah, instead of answering the question, she said, "Come see me." And so I went to see her, and she handed me an envelope. She said, "Your grandfather told me to give you this before he passed away." And I opened it up, and he wrote down the original recipe, and he said, "Give that to her." And I'm like, it's a piece of paper to the rest of the world, but to me, I'm sitting there like I'm hearing fireworks and explosions, and like,
wow,
oh
really?
my God. And then, it's just like the brakes. You hit the brakes, like, why me? Wait a minute. Why me? And what do you want me to do with this? It's the conversation, the questions start happening that you don't have an answer to. Mother doesn't have an answer, and I have to figure it out. I'm sitting here now with an envelope and a million questions, and very humbled too, but more questions than answers.
Now, did he ever say to your mom or any family member, but of course your mother, that wait till that right moment and what that right moment would be? Did she ever share that with you? When
No,
did you give it to her?
it was, this is 8 years after he's passed. And I asked her, I was like, why in the world are you waiting 8 years to tell me? And she said,
Right.
all of his children, he has 5 children, Charlynda. I'm the second oldest of 5. And he's got 2 of his sons who were in the culinary industry. And you're telling me that he skipped all of his children and 2 of his grandchildren for looking at the age hierarchy and gives it to the 3rd grandkid with no explanation. And she's the one that doesn't even really like to cook. So I come from a family of really great cooks, and I cook out of survival. So
Mhm.
when I'm cooking, it's because I'm really hungry. Like, I can't think of anything else to do except cook to stay alive. And not that I'm a bad cook, I'm just a lazy cook.
Yeah, it's not your passion. It
Yeah.
doesn't light your fire. No, I get it. I'm the same way. But
She didn't know what to do. She didn't know how to approach them about it. I do know I had an uncle who was building a restaurant, and the concept had the sauce as like a centerpiece. I thought he was the logical choice. So here I am wondering what this means. I'm on active duty. I thought that my purpose was to be in the military. My purpose is to retire, as he thought that service meant retirement. And that was just from his, perspective. I think
Mhm.
you raise your hand and serve for 2 days, you served. And that's just my philosophy. But um, now it's just, I'm at a crossroads. There's a path now. There's something happening, and I don't know what it is. I'm going to continue being in the service until I can figure it out. I sought mentorship. I actually went to Google and Googled free help.
Okay.
And I found an organization that gave me a mentor, and
Mhm.
the mentor was about my grandfather's age, John Suter, and he said, "You want to take care of your family. You need to take this piece of paper and make a food product. You can sell it." I was like, "Sell it? Why would I sell it?" He said, "Kraft, Heinz, they started out with a product. They became a conglomerate. They started manufacturing. They acquired other brands. Multiple generations of their family never have to worry about anything ever again.
Amen.
If they woke up and didn't want to do a thing, they're still going to be okay." And he said, "But you have to think bigger." And he said, "I challenge you to think the largest, where this could go." And so he just painted the picture for me, told me to go home, think about it, pray about it. Uh, and I did. And I came back to him the next time. I said, "Okay, so how do we do this? How fast do we do this?" He said, "Well, I move at the speed of determination." And I was like, "Well, what is that?" He's like, "However determined you are is how fast this will happen. I'll give you
Love
the
that.
checklist. You're a military person. I'll give you the checklist and the regulations. We'll see how fast you get this done."
All right, John, I love that. Power of determination. Wow, I like that. Or the speed of determination.
Needed determination.
Wow, that's
That
very
took
good.
me 4 months from a piece of paper to the first production of what we now call Mutts Sauce.
And so at this point, when you had the very bland meal, went to your mom, she gave you the treasure of your life, and to meeting John, how long? And then the 4 months from that point, how long was that, all of that?
I met my mother in July, and we had the first production that December.
Oh, wow. Okay. But you still were in the military.
Still in the military. So I was doing everything. And my day consisted of waking up super early, going and working all day. I mean, you don't really have hours in the military. It's however long your commander needs you to whenever you get the job done, and then you go home. Sometimes that could be 5, sometimes that could be 8 o'clock at night. I mean, it just depends on what the mission was. It just depends on what it was. And
Right.
I would get home and I would put them in stacks. So if there was a project like file your LLC, file for your tax ID number, and I would give myself, 1 to 3 tasks a day. And I would put them in a stack with the checklist item on top, and I would put 5 of them. And so Monday through Friday, I would come home, have just enough energy mustered up to finish this little stack and go to bed. And that's
I want to stop you for 1 minute. I want our listeners to really pay attention to this, because this is time blocking personified.
yeah.
Truly, time blocking personified. And by taking those, like you said, from your stack of need, you took your 3 projects out and you did them to completion. That's what it takes. It does. So
Yes.
keep
That's
going with it.
right. I didn't know that I hadn't associated it with time blocking, but that makes a lot of sense. Yes, that's what I would do every night. And he said, don't get overwhelmed, because if you look at the whole list, that's when you start feeling defeated. You're like, oh my God, I only finished 2 things on this list of 15 things. And so
But you finished.
right. So if you tell yourself you only have 2 things, then you can go to sleep with that sense of accomplishment, and makes it easier to get through each day when you're like, oh, I'm so tired. By Friday, you're like, oh my gosh. We had our first event, and I planned backwards. So that's the other thing, is I planned an event with the local Chamber of Commerce before we even had production. But I told everybody, you're going to try the sauce. So that meant that the sauce has to get made. I don't care how. It has to happen, or I'm going to embarrass myself.
Even if it was served in little cups, whatever, you would be there and you would have the Mutts Sauce. Yes.
Can't back out. So we had that first production and had an event a couple days later, and we sold all 700 of the first production. And I went back to John and said, John, we have no sauce, but I have all this cash. And I said, what do I do? He said, you take the money, you make more sauce.
Amen.
Sell it again. I'm like, it can't be that simple. He's like, yeah. I mean, he said, there's layers to it. But he said, but you'll see that just sell your product.
Right.
Tell your story.
Right. I call it start. You started, and then you're going to start scaling, but you started. And that's the most important step in anything, is that start. Because how many times, and I know you've seen this with people that you've known that have an idea, maybe have been given this gift of the recipe from Grandpa Charlie, but they talk themselves out of things.
Oh, yes.
Right? And you continued on. You took that first step and you continued on, held those goals, got to the Chamber of Commerce event, sold out, and continued on. Bravo, girl. Bravo.
Thank you. It's been an honor. And to your original question, I was able to do that routine of active duty selling sauce for 2 years. And I did start to feel the burnout. It was real. I mean, when you're working basically 7 days a week, when you start having events on the weekends, start doing farmers markets on the weekends, trade shows. So now you're not working 5 days a week, you're working 7 days a week. and I wasn't getting any relief. And the longer that you're in the military, if you're dedicated, and my grandfather had this philosophy, like if you don't give it everything you got, you need to step aside and let somebody else in,
Mhm.
put their boots on and do what they got to do. So you can't slack in serving your country. The
Mhm.
moment you feel like you can't give it 110%, you'll know when the time is. And
Mhm.
I remember sitting at my desk one day, and in my head, I wasn't thinking about all of the things that I needed to do work wise. I was thinking of, oh my gosh, I need to get this done for Mutts Sauce. Oh my gosh, I need to get this done for
Yeah.
Mutts Sauce. And I'd never thought of that way before. It was always just like grinding, grinding, grinding in my military. I had the whole 20 years. I knew, what I wanted to do. If I just work really hard here, bloom where I'm planted, then maybe these other doors would open as far as the military was concerned. Um, it gets harder. It doesn't get easier in the military, especially as an officer. You're trying to enroll yourself in programs to make yourself competitive for promotions.
Mhm.
So they foster this environment of over like you're in school, you're in not just MBA school, you're in military school, you're
Mhm.
trying to do all these things to make yourself stand out and do your job the best anybody could possibly do it. There's a lot of pressure in that because there's
Yeah.
so many talented people in uniform. I mean, just
Mhm.
that's why our military is so great, because we have so many great people.
Mhm. Yeah, very competitive, but and like you said, the environment fosters that. Like you said, very talented, bright people that are all vying for those positions. So yes, I could see that becoming exhausting in itself. Yeah.
Mhm. And there was something about, I was starting to learn a little bit more about myself. Entrepreneurship was teaching me about who I am, my passions and desires, and that really it wasn't jiving, the whole competitive nature, because I didn't need that validation anymore. I didn't need the promotions to validate
Mhm.
my life path. I was like, I could never get promoted again and be just fine because I'm passionate about what I'm doing here with Mutts Sauce.
That's right.
And it just, I was starting to feel a conflict. And there was a position that I wanted to take military wise. I was grinding away in my position, and my personal life was becoming important. My other half at the time had gone to Washington, D.C. Thought he was going to stay for another year. We'd chase each other around the globe. And I was like, this is getting emotionally exhausting. To getting turned down anytime I wanted to be in the same location, they were saying no. The
Mhm.
last commander I had, he said, if you work yourself to the bone, basically, I will let you go to Washington, D.C.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
I'm grinding. Of course, I'm still working hard with Mutts Sauce, but I was grinding. And that commander left, a new one came in. The new commander said, I want to stick you on a contract negotiation. I said, but sir, the previous commander said that I could go to Washington, D.C. He's like, well, I'm not him. And I said, but isn't our well being important? And he said, it, we're taught people first, mission always. He said, mission first, people, then people. He said, you're going to do what I tell you to do if
Mhm.
you want to stay in that uniform. And when he said that, I was like, hold up. you know, would you want someone who's like super depressed and moping around for a year
Mhm.
just to get your job done? It was like, and when it comes to contract negotiations, which we call source selections, there's something that is really great for the resume. I already had one in my records. There were other captains at the time who needed source selection experience. I was like, so you're taking away from someone else's experience because you're comfortable. Thank you for believing in me, but it doesn't help my career. And that I think that whole like disregard for who I am as a person
Mhm.
at the same time that I'm having this internal struggle was a perfect storm.
But I'm thinking, I'm listening to you, and I mean, we could go and talk about the gentleman, and it's pointless. But God uses people in certain circumstances. And remember, back in high school when you injured yourself, and that took you to a different course. And here, this circumstance led you to ultimately say, "I'm out of here."
Yeah, I found a colonel, told her my story. She had the ability to enroll me in the transition program. And I just walked into my commander's office and I said, "You're going to have to find someone else. I'm no longer active duty, sir." And he just sat there like, "What?" But I felt a sense of relief.
Yes.
I went to the recruiter, the reserve recruiter. I said, I'm here. I still want to serve. Can I still put my uniform on?" They're like, "Welcome to the Air Force Reserves. And now you're basically a civilian who does military duty when she can."
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that became my life path. And that's what I've been doing now for 7 years. Mutts Sauce in the reserves.
So when I see the photos of you in uniform, those are not older pictures. You're still in the reserve. And when I see, you with other gals or whatever, it's current pictures.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So let's roll on to Mutts Sauce with where I want to pick up and share with our guests, TED Talk, Damon Johns, a little bit about that piece, taking it from, fairs and events like that and trade shows to taking it to the next level.
Yeah.
Share a little bit about that.
Well, entrepreneurship is a roller coaster and it's been a wild ride. It is, Mutts Sauce, everything that people see right now. I tell you, a piece of paper. And I want you to look at whatever's people in the audience. I want you to look at whatever is going on in your life right now and something that you said, "Oh, that could be X, Y, and Z." Yes, it could. It could be greater than you could ever imagine. Because even 6 months in, we went to Shark Tank. We were on Shark Tank 6 months as a company, didn't get a deal, another story of rejection, but they just said, "You're 6 months old as a company. It's great that you're even here." And this is a rejection that you shouldn't go home and go, "Oh, woe is me." This is when you should go, "Holy crap, I was here." And then all these sharks are giving me advice on how to keep going. And that's what I did.
Exactly.
I kept going. I listened to them. I instituted processes. It was very important that as an entrepreneur, you look at processes and things that are repeatable. If someone came in and they needed to help you, where you need to accept help on your journey, make it so people can help you, work for you. Help you get to the next level, help you scale. So I was a student this whole time. I've been a student as much as I've been a leader. And we won Bob Evans Farms Veteran-Owned Business of the Year in 2017. And that is where I eventually met Damon John, because they assigned him as the celebrity mentor for the 3 veterans that they chose. And I said, how interesting is it that on the journey, the shark that I wanted to pitch to at Shark Tank was Damon John. He was the only one who was not there.
Oh, really? Oh, I was wondering that. That piece, that makes total sense.
So
Okay.
when I got to the Bob Evans Farms contest and I met with him and I was talking to him, in my head to myself, I'm screaming because I was like, I prayed that I got to meet him at Shark Tank and I didn't get to meet him. And now here it is. They have placed 2 chairs in an empty room. I walk in and he's sitting in the chair and he said, "Come here, sit down. What do you want to know?" I'm like, this is not happening.
Right.
So
Even better than Shark Tank, meaning that
better than
intimate
Shark Tank.
connection.
Because
Yeah.
his full attention is just, how can I help you?
Mhm.
And what a personality he has, that is true to who he is. He
Yes,
just
it's hard.
to
Mhm.
help you. That's why he's
Mhm.
called the people shark. It is
Yes.
the best moniker I've ever heard for a person that really does match up with their personality. And from that, I listened to him about how to scale the company. And it was really about putting your investment where you could see a return on investment. A lot of entrepreneurs will say, "Oh my gosh, I made a mistake that I talk about. I bought 5,000 pens. When I first started out, I said, I need pens. I need these monogram Mutts Sauce pens." And he said, "How many bottles of sauce are you going to sell by using a pen? Does a
Right.
pen make someone hungry?" I said, "No." He said, "Then why are you putting your money there?"
Mhm.
And so that you have to think about that. Put
Mhm.
it where you're going to get cash flow. If you don't have sauce, you can't sell anything. You don't have cash flow. And that trajectory, I mean, 2017, 2018, after meeting him, was just really great, I think, for the company. And when the pandemic hit, I was sitting there like, okay, I was still stubborn because he had made hints about this new site called Shopify.com where you can sell things, an online marketplace. E-commerce is great. And I'm like, who's going to buy food online? Hard headed, just wasn't.
Right.
Several
Mhm.
of his colleagues were saying the same thing. "Charlynda, you should really put this online." Didn't listen. So when the pandemic hit, 90% of my income, my revenue was from trade shows, in-person events. Everything was canceled
Exactly.
from March to September. And I said, "Well, we're a startup. We're having to start over because there's no way we're going to make money if we don't pivot and listen to our mentors and put this thing online." And everything you see now, we've actually had more revenue in 2020 than previous years. So I'm one of those stories of how you've done better during the pandemic than you did prior, only because you have to meet people where they are. And that's something I learned from one of my old interns.
Right.
She
Right.
said, I have to stop telling people to get on my level, because she said, I used to be that person that would say, get on my level. She said, but really, sometimes you need to meet people at their level if you want to feel
Right.
understood.
Right.
And
It's, as I've shared with you, I'm a serial entrepreneur myself. And one of the things that I'm going to be doing in the next, post this sale, I'm working on, because I have a line of skincare, but to endorse other people and help you and explore and expand and that type of thing. But because it is all online, there's no getting around it. It is what it is. And it doesn't mean that you won't end up on QVC or something of that nature. I'm not saying that at all. I'm sure you will. But what I'm saying is that dynamic will continue to evolve your exposure. It's very exciting. We could go on and on. I have so many thoughts and ideas. We'll have to talk offline because I just would love to share some thoughts and ideas with you. But we do need to close. And before we do, Miss Charlynda, I ask every guest the same question. Now, I don't know if you've ever read 3 Feet from Gold from Sharon Lechter and Greg Reed. It's part of the Napoleon Hill Foundation. And Sharon is one of my mentors and an amazing businesswoman. She was a co-author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad with Robert Kiyosaki. And she left there and joined the Napoleon Hill Foundation. And she and Greg Reed wrote this book, 3 Feet from Gold. I would suggest it's really great book for an entrepreneur. But Sharon in it has and it's a fable, it's a story, and it's loosely autobiographical of Greg Reed's life. But in it, she has what she calls the success formula. And one of the foundational kind of in before it goes into Greg's life, it's about this gentleman from the gold rush days. And he was in the East Coast, went out to the West, bought a little prospective vein and started chipping away at it and got very frustrated and ended up selling it to a townie. And the townie bought the vein and or perspective and went back, and 3 feet, he hit gold. He struck gold. Okay. So again, we spoke about this earlier. How many people give up? You got that piece of gold and you might have just put it in your drawer and said another day or in 6 months, for goodness sakes. as the shark said, hello, yes, the fact that you even pursued on that. So Sharon, though, has in this what she calls the success formula. And it's your passion plus talent, passion plus my brain, the talent. Yes, I'm sorry. Passion plus talent times association times action plus faith equals success.
Okay.
Okay. And now I'm not going to ask you all of them, but what is your passion and what is your talent?
Well, I'm all about legacy. I'm passionate about leaving a legacy that is long lasting and great impact, positive impact. And that's what people think. Am I going to leave the company? I'm not focused on leaving the company to my son, who I just had last year,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm focused on instilling the values and the things that grit and determination that keep going, those intangible things that he can take along with him and apply to any aspect of his life and be his definition of success, because I'm not going to define success for him. But that's what I'm passionate about. My gift is actually seeing the great things in other people. It's hard for me to see them in myself. I'll be transparent. It's hard for me to see some of the vision that Damon had before I saw it, what the shark saw before I saw it. But I can see it in other people. It's
Mm-hmm.
for me to see it and to cheerlead other people. So
Mm-hmm.
I
That's
think
a wonderful
my
thing, though.
gift is to
Yes.
help unlock those things for people.
One of the things that Sharon says, Charlynda, is that of her, three core things, uh, about your legacy. But one is to live your legacy, not to wait till you've passed on. So that's what you're saying, is that you're living that and you're building that. And that is absolutely foundationally wonderful, because that will continue in your spirit and continue on, like you said, for your son and others. So that's one really wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This hour has gone by. As I said, I could have gone on and on with asking questions and thoughts and ideas. We'll have to continue this in other ways, but and maybe another Unique Leaders down the road as your journey evolves. But truly, thank you so much for joining us today on Unique Leaders.
I enjoyed our chat. Thank you, Megan, for having me.
So hang in the green room for a few minutes and I'll be right back. I'm working with a new camera and I lose my point here, but thank you so much for joining us today on Unique Leaders Live. It was a wonderful visit with Charlynda. I'm sure you enjoyed it as much as I did. And with that, it will be such a blessing to so many young people thinking about going into the military, people that are looking to build an entrepreneurial business, how the two bridge together. And it is in that story is her success. So I would love you to share this out. It is on YouTube, so please go there, subscribe, because again, not only with Charlynda's story, but others that we have been with, it would be a great blessing, not only to us, but other people that you share with. And on my website, novitaSpa.com, as well as MeganDiMartino.com, I have my book, Hope and Possibilities. And that's what the thread through all of people's stories, such as Charlynda's, is that they have hope and they have infinite possibilities. But it is never too early or too late to create the life of your dreams. And you see that through her story and the fabric of her life with her grandfather, her grandparents, her mom, and now her son. So it's never too early or too late. So go to truly MeganDiMartino.com. It is there at free for you. I put it there during the very challenging time last spring to give people hope. So go there, download it. It's free. It is on Amazon. It was went to number one on Amazon January of 2020, but it is no charge to you on my website. So please go there, enjoy it, and share it out as well. We will look forward again to seeing you next Friday for another segment of Unique Leaders Live. Have a blessed weekend. We'll see you soon.